Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so we are now continuing with what we were discussing yesterday, and that was with regards to the concept of the intention of when something actually becomes a commodity of sale, or rather when it becomes something zakatable. Yeah, when zakat applies to it. So we said the last masala that we were talking about was we said if there's a person who has purchased an item. Yeah, so let's say for example I purchase an item, I purchase a laptop or a car or anything, and then I intended to buy it for resale. But what happened was that when I purchased it, I decided I was going to use it myself. So now the intention has changed. So because the intention has changed, what happens is the item is no longer considered to be a commodity of sale. It's not considered to be a urud tijara. Yeah, so it's not considered to be anything which is a commodity of sale, and therefore zakat doesn't apply to it anymore. So batalat anha zakat that we said, right? And what was the reason for this? So we said the reason is because intention on its own doesn't work. In fact, we kind of came up with a rule, and that rule was this: that if you're ever going to do something, the intention has to be with it in order for the intention to be effective. So the amal plus the intention. But if you're going to leave something, then over here, that leaving is considered to be an amal itself. Now, I didn't mention this, but some of the commentators, they actually say that like tarkut tijara, not doing tijara, is not really an amal. So therefore, to leave something, intention is sufficient. You don't need to do amal. Yeah? In other words, is not doing something considered to be an amal? Yeah, and technically, no, it's not. Like for example, I'm not drinking alcohol at the moment. Yeah, so that's not an amal. It's not like I'm doing the amal of not drinking alcohol. Yeah, and this is where the idea where some of the scholars, they actually sort of like differ on this issue of when you intend not to drink alcohol, do you get reward for it or not? So the scholars say that if a person intends not to drink alcohol, like we're doing now, we don't get reward for it. But you only get reward for it when you have the urge, or you're very close to committing the act of drinking alcohol, and you make an intention of not doing it. That's when you get reward for it. Yeah. So again, this idea of intention itself, this can be expounded more. Like you can look at it from a fiqh point of view. For instance, like in the concept of wudu, you don't need intention over there. Why is it that intention is not required in wudu? What's the reason for that? Why is the intention required in tayammum? What's the reason for that? And likewise, in the chapter of salat, why is the intention required for praying the salat? Do you need the intention before the action, immediately before the action? Do you need the intention after the? Can you have the intention after you start the action? And then in fasting as well. Yeah, so there's like this whole discussion of in fasting. Why is it that when you fast Nafal or Ramadan fast, you can actually make the intention all the way until half the day? Yeah, so again, these are all sort of like things that can be discussed in the concept of intention, but we're not going to go into that. We're just going to go back to this masala. So now, if a person was to buy the laptop on Monday, and then the person was to make an intention that he was going to sell it, and then on Tuesday he decided to use it himself, personal use. So now what's happened on Wednesday, he decides to resell it. So lam takun tijarati, this will not be counted as tijara hatta yabi'aha, until he sells it. Yeah, and then the money that he makes from it, that cash, he has it on his day of his zakat. Yeah, so فيكون في ثمنها زكاة. In that case, the thaman, the price that he's received for that laptop, if it's his zakat day, he gives zakat on it. Yeah. Now here he hasn't mentioned this, but some of the scholars have actually even said things like, let's say a person was to buy something with like for example, let's say I'm a business and I buy and sell, I don't know, let's say mobile phones. So I went and I bought with some mobile phones some more mobile phones. So if I use these mobile phones which are already prepared for sale, yeah, they're already there to be sold, and I went and exchanged them for other mobile phones. So over there, the fuqaha say you don't even need an intention over there, because the mal that you used, the phones, to purchase the new phones was already prepared for zakat anyway. Was already prepared for business anyway. So they were already zakatable. Yeah, so that's why they say the intention doesn't really matter over there, because you're already using mal which is already prepared for tijara. Yeah, and that's mentioned in a lot of the books mention it, and Radd al-Muhtar mentioned. At the end I'll try to just read the text. Okay, so Monday I buy the laptop. Tuesday I decide to use it for my own personal use. And then Wednesday I decide to sell it. So he says now this laptop is not going to be considered to be mal zakat. لأن النية لم تتصل بالعمل, because the argument was that there's no amal with the niyyah. In other words, there needs to be, so he's got intention on Wednesday of selling it. I've got intention of selling the laptop on Wednesday to another person, but there's no amal of tijara over here. Yeah, as in there is no amal of tijara in the sense that I'm selling the laptop, but there was no buying it with intention of sell. لأن النية لم تتصل بالعمل. Yeah, because the niyyah there was no amal associated to it. إذ هو لم يتجر فلم تعتبر. Yeah, because he did not make profit from it. He was just selling it off. فلم تعتبر, therefore this will not be considered. The niyyah will not be considered. لم تعتبر النية. Yeah, niyyah will not be considered. And then then I said to you that in the Hashia, it mentions just a little bit about this. Yeah, حاصل هذا الفصل, the summary of this is أن ما كان من أعمال الجوارح. So this is Imam Ibn Humam mentions this. Anything which is of the actions of the limbs, yeah, فلا تتحقق بمجرد النية, cannot happen without niyyah. وما كان من التروك, and anything which is to leave, taraka, turuk means taraka, كفى فيه مجردها. And that was I was saying to you early on, that just by leaving something, yeah, niyyah is sufficient. But by doing something, the niyyah has to be accompanied with the amal. فالتجارة من الأول فلا يكفي مجرد النية. Yeah, so tijara falls under the first category, the limbs one, because you're selling something. فلا يكفي مجرد النية بخلاف تركها, as opposed to leaving tijara. Yeah, so in other words, this is what he's trying to explain. And then he says لهذا يصير المسافر مقيما, and then we finished on this and we said a musafir, like if I'm traveling from Birmingham to Manchester, a musafir becomes a resident بمجرد النية, with just simply making an intention. Yeah, so musafir travels to Manchester, and by simply making an intention that he is going to stay there, that's sufficient. Yeah, why? Because the over here there's a tarkus safar. Yeah, so the guy who's going to Manchester, he's leaving safar, so leaving safar is sufficient, niyyah is sufficient. ولا يصير المقيم مسافر إلا بالسفر. However, muqim person cannot become a musafir, because a musafir is amal, it's action. It's like your limbs have to move. So therefore, a muqim cannot become musafir unless it's accompanied with a safar, a physical, like a journey. Okay. All right. Now this is today's lesson. وإن اشترى شيئا ونواه للتجارة كان للتجارته. If a person was to buy something and intends it for sale, كان للتجارة. Yeah, because you've got niyyah over there and you've got amal over there. So niyyah is he's purchased it. اشترى شيئا, his purchase or buying is an action, and then the intention is he's going to sell it on. He's going to sell it on. So he's got niyyah, he's got amal. So إن اشترى شيئا ونواه للتجارة كان للتجارة. This will be counted as tijara. Yeah, this will be counted as business commodity, and therefore if the zakat date comes and he has this with him, he'd have to calculate in his zakat assets. لاتصال النية بالعمل, because the niyyah is connected with the amal. Yeah, so niyyah and amal have come together over here. Again, like I said, in today's times, this would apply to people who buy houses, like estate agents. They buy houses, fix them up with the intention of selling them off. So if the estate agents have, let's say, 10 houses, and their zakat anniversary comes, they'd have to give zakat on the value of the property. Okay, and the whole zakat of urud is actually going to come later on. in the chapter of Urud al-Tijara. Yeah. So he says, بِخِلَافِ مَا إِذَا وَرِثَ وَنَوَى لِلتِّجَارَةِ. As opposed to if a person was to inherit something. So let's say, for example, like I inherit something. So let's say, for instance, my granddad passed away and he left me something. And I intended with that, so he left me a laptop. And I intended that I'm going to sell it on. Yeah, so on Monday he passed away. And as soon as he passed away, on Tuesday I received the laptop. And I intended when I received it that I was going to sell it. Yeah. So this does not become mal tijara. Yeah. So إذا ورث ونوى للتجارة. Why is this for? Yeah. Because لأنه لا عمل منه. Because there's no amal. So remember I told you yesterday that try to like make yourself like these columns where you try to highlight the differences between masail. Yeah, what are the differences between tijara? So you write down tijara and then inheritance. What's the difference? So tijara is an action which is of the limbs, like you have to go and, ijab and qabul and trade, etc. And that's how you become owner of something. Whereas inheritance, you do nothing. It's actually someone else does something, they die, and then automatically you inherit. So ma idha waritha wa nawa litijarati. So here, it won't be for zakat. So if I receive, let's say, for example, a house in my inheritance, or I receive, something very valuable, and my zakat anniversary actually comes, I won't have to give zakat on those things. Yeah, why is this? لأنه لا عمل منه. Because there is no amal on my behalf. Yeah, no amal. So, okay, so now we understand, like, in the spectrum, we can put this in the spectrum now. As in, if there is tijara, if there is amal and there's intention, then that item now automatically falls as a asset of zakat. And if there's no intention, like inheritance, if there's no amal, like inheritance, but there is intention, it still won't, it will not become a zakat asset. So you got the two opposites now. Now let's look at other actions. So the fuqaha now, they bring other actions. For example, gifting. So in Islam, gifting, first of all, I need to explain some things about gifting. So one of the things that you need to know about gifting is gifting only happens when you accept a gift. So you can actually refuse gifts. Okay. So for example, let's say I was to give, let's say, Zafar a pen, right? I decided to give Zafar a pen. Okay, I'm gifting him a pen. Now, he can actually say to me, no, I don't want it. And even if I gave the pen to him, it won't become his pen, right? So gifting is not something which is like, unilateral. It's actually a bilateral agreement. So although it's not a bilateral exchange, remember that, there's not a bilateral exchange, because if something is a bilateral exchange, it means items from both sides exchange hands. And that is the definition of a trade. So when something happens on a unilateral, so one person gives something, then that is not called a trade. That is, it's usually considered to be like a gift. Yeah, what we call hiba. That's the first rule. Second rule you need to understand about gifting is that gifting only becomes effective when the giftee, or the person who has received the gift, actually takes it in their possession, has to hold it. So if I say to Zafar, this pen is yours, I'm gifting it to you, it will not be his pen until Zafar holds it. So once he holds it, now it legally becomes his now. Okay. So here's the question now. So Imam Sahib al-Hidayah brings several examples now, okay, to show, we got amal over here. So gifting is a kind of amal, because I'm giving a pen and Zafar is obviously accepting a pen, and then he takes it. So there's amal over here. So if a person accepts a pen, if a person accepts something as a gift and intends that they're going to sell it. So I'm gifting Zafar this pen, and Zafar's already intending that he's going to sell this pen off. That's totally fine. It's his pen if he takes it. But will the item in his possession now be considered to be a mal al-tijara? Yeah, will it be? That's what we want to know. So there's amal, but there's amal and there's intention. But what we want to know is tijara. So if you write tijara in one column, okay, and then you write in another column inheritance, okay, there's a difference between the two. But what about accepting a gift? What about that? What does that fall under? Does that fall under tijara or not? So here's where Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad differ on this action. Yeah. So Imam Imam Muhammad, he says, no, it can only be amal of tijara. He says, niyyah has to be accompanied by amal of tijara. It has to be a bilateral exchange, basically. It can't be unilateral. Whereas Imam Abu Yusuf, he says, no. He says, so long as it's an amal, just any amal, where a person does something with his limbs, he says that is sufficient for the niyyah to be accompanied with it. Now, because of this difference, in gifting, Imam Abu Yusuf is going to say, yes, this item now becomes an item of a zakat asset. Yeah, and Imam Muhammad says, no, it doesn't. Number 2, wasiyah. So wasiyah, for example, let's say I am dying. I say to Zafar, I say, Zafar, look, when I die, I want this pen to go to you, yeah, as a wasiyah. I want this pen to go to you. So now, again, this is not like inheritance, because wasiyah is like gift, but it's post-death gift. So therefore, Zafar has to do an amal to accept it. Again, Imam Abu Yusuf says, because there is an amal, then that niyyah is sufficient for the item to become an item of zakat. And Imam Muhammad says, no, it has to be amal of tijara. And this is not an amal of tijara. Everyone understand? The next one is nikah. Yeah, so again, in nikah. So let's say, for example, like I get married to a woman. And I say to this woman, right, I'm going to give you a laptop as a gift, as a mahar. So now she intends that when she receives this laptop, she's going to go sell it off. Yeah. So again, Imam Abu Yusuf says, because there is a niyyah and because there is an amal of accepting the mahar. So accepting the mahar is her right. It's like accepting a gift. So she accepts it. But this is not considered to be like a unilateral, a bilateral agreement. It's a unilateral. So one way. So therefore, Muhammad says, no, it's not an asset of zakat. Number 4. What about khula, the opposite way? So let's say this woman that I married, she wants a divorce. She goes to court. She files for a divorce. She files for a khula. And then I say, okay, I'll take the laptop back. So when I receive the laptop back, so what happens over here? So again, Imam Abu Yusuf says that if he makes the intention of in the selling, it becomes mal tijara. And Imam Muhammad says it doesn't. Okay. As-sulh an al-qawad. As-sulh an al-qawad basically means that if let's say for example, like I was to kill someone. So this victim now, their family comes to me and they want my life. Yeah. So they want, obviously, my life to be taken. Capital punishment. And I make agreement. I say, look, if you drop the case, I will give you my car. And then they said, okay. So this is called a sulh, out of court settlement. Yeah, sulh, an out of court settlement. So they accept this and they're allowed to accept it. Yeah, so this is allowed because if a person, it doesn't come under bribery basically. Yeah, because the Sharia has already allowed for the victim's family to receive blood money. So therefore, this sulh is valid, but if they intend that they're going to sell this car, Abu Yusuf says this car now for them becomes mal tijara and therefore zakat. And Imam Muhammad says no, because there was no amal of tijara over here. So everyone understand all that? That's where the difference is. So look, وَلَوْ مَلَكَهُ بِالْهِبَةِ, if he was to, like we said in this case, Zafar was to become owner of it via hiba, through hiba, gifting, or bil wasiyati, or through making a bequest, yeah, so like I said, or an nikah, or through marriage, or al khula, or khula, the other way around, or sulh and al qawad, or making a sulh, which is, like we said, out of court settlement of qawad. Qawad simply means like a murder, qisas. وَنَوَاهُ لِلتِّجَارَةِ, and he intends it for tijara. Yeah, the second person, they intend it for tijara. Then كان للتجارة, it will be counted as a tijara item in the Abi Yusuf rahimahullah. According to Abu Yusuf, it will be counted as a tijara item. Yeah, so therefore it's going to be considered to be zakatable. Why? لِاقْتِرَانِهَا بِالْعَمَل, because he says it is accompanied with amal. What is that amal? And he's saying that amal is simply the acceptance of the item. You accepting the item, he treats it as this as being an amal. Yeah. وعند محمد, and according to Imam Muhammad, he says no. لا يصير للتجارة, it does not become an item of tijara. لا يصير للتجارة. Right? So it doesn't become a commodity of trade. Why? Simply because he says لأنها لم تقارن عمل التجارة, because it has not been accompanied with the action of trade. There has to be these 5 things that are mentioned above: hiba, wasiya, nikah, khula, sulh, and qawd. These are not amal of tijara. They are amal, but not amal of tijara. Yeah. Now, why is amal of tijara important? It's because, remember, we're talking about the idea of mal nami, isn't it? So that's why it makes sense, and many of the later Hanafis have actually given fatwa on Imam Muhammad's position on this, because it makes sense. Because we said mal simply does not become productive on its own unless it's gold and silver. Yeah, something has to happen to it. So therefore, these particular sort of like examples that I mentioned above, these do not fulfill the criteria for productive wealth. It doesn't become mal nami. Okay, now notice over here it says inda. Okay, now in fiqh, when it says inda, so you have qala, you have inda, and you have an. Okay, whenever it says qala Abu Yusuf, that means it's been recorded in the books that Abu Yusuf said this. So it's a very strong report, basically, right? Like, we're very sure that Abu Yusuf said this. If it says an, that means it's been reported that he said it. As in, it's not as strong. He might have said it, but might not have held that position. Like, he might have left that position. So an is simply by saying something like, it's been reported that he said this. So-and-so reported so-and-so reported it from him. So it's not as strong as qala. Okay? And then you have third, you have inda. Inda basically means according to them. According to Abu Yusuf, da. According to Imam Muhammad, da. Yeah? Now, inda is a bit different, because inda can mean later Hanafis understood that this is what Abu Yusuf's position was. Yeah? Like, they say, like, we believe Abu Yusuf held this position. So he didn't say it. It's not been necessarily reported, but this is inda. So inda, just understand that inda doesn't necessarily mean they 100% said it. It might have been a back projection of some of the scholars. So they might have thought, you know what, because Abu Yusuf said this about Masala X, then this must be his position about Masala Y and Z. Yeah, so we use inda over there. Do you understand that concept of inda? Yeah. So a lot of times students don't know the differences between these, and it's important because so many times what will happen is Abu Yusuf may not have said a thing regarding a particular masala. Someone else might have assumed that Abu Yusuf holds this position, and then it just becomes confusing because people think that Abu Yusuf said this, or even Imam Abu Hanifa. Some people say, according to Abu Hanifa, this is it, but maybe he didn't say it. Maybe it was just some later Hanafis assuming that because Abu Hanifa has said this about so and so, he must have held this position about such and such a thing. Right. So then he says, وَقِيلَ الْإِخْتِلَافُ عَلَى عَكْسِهِ. Yeah. So اختلاف على عكسه. So it's said that the ikhtilaf is actually the other way around, meaning Abu Yusuf in all these 5 examples says it does not become mal tijara, and Imam Muhammad actually says it does become mal tijara. Now, this is an interesting thing, because what this shows us is the Hanafis were very careful of recording in their books confusions that they had as well. Because either Imam Muhammad said that, and Abu Yusuf said that, or they didn't say it. So here, by saying qila al-ikhtilaf al-aksi, this shows that number one, the Hanafis were honest in recording in their books what they found in the works and was passed down from the Hanafis. And secondly, this also shows that sometimes what happens is the Hanafis have also, have reports which can be, confusing as well to them. Yeah. But this doesn't. This is not really a problem. The reason it's not a problem is because whenever we look at masail, we always look at masail whether that masala conforms with the ultimate rules of the Hanafi madhab, what we call the qawaid, the universal maxims. Do they kind of conform with what the Hanafis say about such and such? If they do, then it's fine. Yeah, then it doesn't matter really who if Abu Yusuf says it or Muhammad says it. Yeah. So قيل الاختلاف على عكسه, that the ikhtilaf is the other way around. Okay. Now in the Hanafi school there are like sort of like situations where, for instance, even Imam, like in Jami al-Saghir, there's like 6 places. Yeah, 6 places in Jami al-Saghir. So Jami al-Saghir is one of the early books that was written. It was one of the early books that was written by Imam Muhammad. One of the 6, his 6, the collection. So the Jami al-Saghir is actually all the riwayats that Abu Yusuf got from Abu Hanifa, and he told them to Muhammad. So this book is unique because it's where Imam Muhammad documents all of what Abu Yusuf told him from Abu Hanifa, where Imam Muhammad didn't get it from Abu Hanifa directly. Yeah, so in this book, there are actually 6 masail in this book, where when Imam Muhammad wrote the whole book, he showed it to Imam Abu Yusuf, and Imam Abu Yusuf, 6 of those masail, he highlighted and said, I didn't say this to you. And Imam Muhammad said, no, you did say it to me. So there's actually a difference between Abu Yusuf and between Muhammad of whether these masail were actually said or not. Yeah, but Imam Muhammad still kept them in the book, recorded in the book. And even till today, we have them recorded in the book. And in Hidayah, he actually brings those 6 masail whenever they come. Yeah, like one's in Salat and one's in Nikah and other places. So he brings those masail and says, look, this is one of the masalas which Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf had a difference of whether Abu Yusuf said it or not. So again, this is important for us to understand which masail are directly, reported from the early Hanafis, and then which ones later on were assumed that the Hanafis said. Okay, and another benefit of knowing this is what tends to happen in the Hanafi timeline is, let's say for example, later on in the 700s and 800s, a Hanafi comes out with something, and people, if they're not aware of how the history of Hanafi madhab works, they might think to themselves, oh, this must be the Hanafi school. Like for example, some strange things later Hanafis have said, like for instance, the wiping of the neck when you do wudu. Yeah, you wipe the neck when you do your wudu, wipe the neck. Yeah, we don't have any record of this from early Hanafis. In fact, from early Hanafis, we don't even have record of raising of the finger in tashahhud. So the raising of finger, how you raise it, how you put it down, how you hold your fingers, there's no record of that in all of the, even Hidayah doesn't even have it. Like all the way, up to the 700s, you don't have mention in the books of how you're supposed to raise the finger in tashahhud. But as Hanafis, we're like, hardwired in thinking that the tashahhud issue is a very Hanafi thing, that you raise your finger and you put it down. But this was something that later Hanafis, they actually differed in. So some Hanafis said you don't raise your finger. Some Hanafis said no, you do raise your finger. And then there was like ikhtilaf, and then the stronger position was that you do raise your finger. But for someone to say this was Abu Hanifa's position, that's wrong, guys, because Abu Hanifa didn't say it, nor did the Sahibain say it. Okay, so I just want to need something over here. Okay, so this is in Badaya Sanai. So he says, anything besides gold and silver, when it comes to business stock, inventory, he says, إنما يكون الإعداد فيها للتجارة بالنية, that it being reserved for trade has to be done with intention. So gold and silver, you don't. If you're a gold and silver seller, you don't have to have intention for it. Any gold and silver that you accumulate is automatically zakatable. However, everything besides gold and silver requires a niyyah for it to become. لأنها كما تصلح للتجارة, because everything besides gold and silver, just like they qualify to be merchandise for selling, تصلح للانتفاع, they also qualify to be used in and of themselves. بل المقصود الأصلي منها ذلك, rather the main primary function of anything besides gold and silver is actually to be used. Gold and silver are normally means to get something, isn't it? Like people don't want gold and silver, or in today's times cash. They don't want cash for the sake of cash. They want cash because they want to get something with it. Yeah, they want to buy things. So لا بد من التعيين التجارة. That's why he says, that's why you need intention for these things, simply because these things are primarily not for buying and selling. And then he just talks a bit about livestock as well. So he says the livestock are the same. When people buy livestock, he says the livestock, there has to be an intention of that livestock to be self-grazing in order for it to become zakatable. So if you feed the livestock yourself, you don't give zakat on it. So that's why you need intention. ثم نية التجارة والإسهام لا تعتبر ما لم تتصل بفعل التجارة. And then he says that simply making an intention of tijara and allowing the animals to graze is not sufficient for that item to become a tijara item. لأن مجرد النية لا عبرة فيه في الأحكام, because intentions in and of themselves have no weight when it comes to legal matters. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, so remember that, it's important this is. So intentions themselves do not hold any weight in legal matters. Right? They do hold weight when it comes to thawab, reward and all that in the akhirah. But we're talking about the court system. So when someone asks you a question, you're only considered to give them an answer based on the court system. He says the reason why niyyah has no weight in the legal system, legal niyyah on its own, niyyah on its own does not have any weight, because the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna Allah afa an ummati, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven from my ummah ma tahaddath bi anfusuhum, anything which they whisper in their minds. So any thoughts that you have in your mind, Allah won't hold you account for that. Ma lam yatakallamu bihi, so long as they don't speak of it or don't do it. And I mentioned this yesterday to you. Actions and your speech, you'll be held accountable for those in court. And even in the akhirah, Allah will not punish you just by thinking things. Yeah. Now, obviously, just on a tangent over here, I mean, someone can say, well, are you allowed to think about like drinking alcohol? Someone just wants to sit down and just for like an hour, just think about drinking alcohol, thinking about fornication, thinking about gambling. Just think, right? Not look at it or anything, but just think about this. Would they be sinful for thinking about it, for indulging in those thoughts? Yeah, or not? So based on this hadith, no, they won't. However, I mentioned this to you a few days ago. Imam Ibn Abidin, he says the Hanafis have not mentioned anything about this, but Shafis have discussed this masala about if a man was having, let's say for example, a cup and he imagined this to be alcohol. Yeah, he imagined it to be alcohol. He thought this was alcohol and he drank it as though it's alcohol. He'd be sinful for that. That's what the Shafis say. So he said this doesn't seem to clash with any of our rules and our maxims. So therefore it makes sense that if a person does indulge, same goes for like if a man is having intimacy with his wife and then he's thinking about another woman and he's imagining her in her place, or the woman's opposite way around. Yeah, the woman's fantasizing about another man. Would that person be sinful for this? So therefore he said, according to the Shafi madhab, yes, they will be sinful. Yeah, for indulging in this. Hanafis have no mention of this. But he says this does not clash with any of the rules of the Hanafi school, so it does make sense that the Hanafis would agree to this, that this would be considered sinful. ثم نية التجارة قد تكون صريحا, and then he says the intention of sale sometimes is explicit, like let's say I buy a laptop and my intention is explicit. وقد تكون دلالة, and sometimes that intention is not explicit but it's assumed, yeah, it's signified. أما الصريح, so as for explicit, ينوي عند عقد التجارة is where a person whilst buying something he intends أن يكون المملوك به للتجارة, that the thing that he's going to own is going to be sold off. بأن اشترى سلعة, such that a person was to purchase an item, ونوى أن تكون للتجارة, that he makes an intention that this item is going to be for resale in the shira at the time when he buys it. فتصير للتجارة, and then this is going to become تجارة. سواء كان الثمن اشترى به من الأثمان مطلقة, whether he's used gold or silver to purchase the item, or whether he's used other trade stock, or whether he's used just like a home item. So even if I, for example, like I barter, I trade in my laptop for that laptop. If I have the intention of tijara, the item becomes an item of tijara. Yeah. Or even if I was to rent out. So the example of rent is like this. Let's say, for example, I've got a house and you come to me. So let's say, for example, like Zafar comes to me. Zafar says to me, look, I want to rent your house. And I say, okay, I'll rent you my house, and as rent, you give me your laptop. So your laptop, give me your laptop as rent. Now, when he gives me that laptop, and I intend that I'm going to sell the laptop off to someone else, that is also comes under tijara as well. Even though it's ijara, even though it's leasing, it still falls under the umbrella of bilateral trade agreement. Yeah. So in a trade, you have goods for goods, and in a ijara, in leasing, you have usufruct for goods. Usufruct is basically what we call manafi, something which is non tangible. It's just benefit. You're using the item. That's all it is. So he's saying even if it's in that. And then he also mentions about this ikhtilaf of Abu Yusuf and Muhammad. And then he says this. He says Al-Qadi al-Shaheed, Qadi Shaheed has actually said that the ikhtilaf is the other way around. Yeah. And he says Abu Hanifa is also on the opinion that it doesn't become tijara. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, the opinion of, like we said, the opinion of the one that it doesn't become tijara is actually a stronger opinion, and fatwa has been given by a lot of scholars. So you can read more of that in Badaya Sana'idais. He mentioned over there, and this is also mentioned in Radd al-Muhtar, also mentioned this as well, and the Dur al-Hukam, yeah, he mentions. He says. Yeah, actually, no. You can read it over there. Okay. وَلَا يَجُوزُ, then he says, and then it is not permissible أداء الزكاة to give zakat إلا بنية مقارنة للأداء. So let's say, for example, like I want to give my zakat. Zakat is an ibadah, isn't it? So because it's an ibadah, there has to be intention of me giving this. So for example, like if my zakat, let's say I've got £1,000, my zakat is £25. So therefore, that £25, when I'm giving it to the recipient of zakat, I have to make the intention that this £25 is for zakat. Okay, so this is called muqarina lil ada. So this is how it should be. Just like when you pray your salat, just before you say Allahu Akbar, your niyyah is muqarina. Yeah, your niyyah is accompanied with the amal. Yeah, and obviously, if you have no niyyah, if I was to give someone £25 and I had no niyyah of it, then it won't be counted as zakat. It will just be counted as voluntary sort of like actions. So لا يجوز أن أداء الزكاة, it is not permitted to perform the zakat, to give the zakat إلا بنية مقارنة, except with an intention that is accompanied with the performance of the action. This is the asl, this is what we call the qiyas. This is how the action should be done. However, now if you think about this, it's going to be quite hard. How many Muslims are there around the world? So let's say 2 billion Muslims. And how many of them give zakat? So let's say out of 2 billion Muslims, let's say 100 million Muslims. Yeah, 100 million. You say 100 million Muslims give zakat. If 100 million Muslims are giving zakat to different people, yeah, and all the 100 million people are going to be giving how much ever they're going to be giving, having an intention every time you give is going to be hard. Yeah, and the reason it's going to be hard is because not everyone gives all their zakat all in one go. Some people split the zakat, yeah, spread the zakat over a month or over 2 months or 3 months. So that's why he says, "O muqarina li'azli miqdar al-wajib," or the person he puts to one side, puts to one side, azal means to put to one side, the amount that's obligatory. So let's say, for example, I know I have to give my zakat. So what I do is I slowly, every week, I separate a little bit into a jar. And I write on there, this is for zakat. Yes, zakat. So it's easier for me to, rather than giving it all in one go, I just separate it all. So now I have this big jar and all I have to do is take the jar. So let's say at home, I have this jar. And every week I've been putting £1 in there. Yeah, because I know roughly my zakat is going to be £25. So roughly every week or so, I just put £1 in there or whatever. And one day I go to work, and let's say, for example, like my brother comes to the house and he sees the jar, and he says, okay, I'll go and give this to the charity shop. So he goes to the charity shop and gives this to the poor people. And I didn't make intention when he was giving it to the charity shop, to the poor people. I didn't make an intention of zakat. But I did intend that this was going to go towards zakat. So that's also sufficient as well. So that's why there's two ways to make intention when you're going to give zakat. So either you make the intention at the time of giving it, which is the asl. Yeah, this is how it should be. Or you make an intention when you're separating it from the rest of your wealth. Like you might have a purse or a wallet, and you have a separate pocket there, and you put like the zakat money in that little pocket there. Whatever you do. So why is this for? لأن الزكاة عبادة. Because zakat is considered to be an ibadah. Okay, it's an act of worship. فكان من شرطها النية. So it just makes sense. Every ibadah requires a niyyah. Yeah. So technically, if I was to give £25 every week to the poor, but I didn't make intention of zakat, it will not be counted as my zakat. I still have to give my zakat when the zakat day comes. But if I gave, every week I gave some money to the poor with the intention this is going towards zakat, that would be allowed, Or if I had a bag or this jar that had money which I had separated, put to one side for zakat, and then I went around from this jar without even thinking, I start giving it to people, then that would also be considered to be fulfilling the zakat. He says, well, aslu, the principle, the underlying principle or overarching principle in this masala, fiha al-iqtiran, is accompanying. Yeah, there has to be an accompanying intention. Intention has to be there. Yeah. Now look, imagine you drew a timeline. Yeah. So for example, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. You gave a poor person, recipient, you gave them zakat, you gave them money on Monday. And this person spends it now on Friday. They spend it on Friday. You're actually allowed to change your intention. So long as they haven't spent it, you're actually allowed to change your intention all the way until they spend it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you've given, let's say, money to someone on Monday, and you definitely 100% know they're not going to spend it before Friday. So you can actually change your intention. Yeah. So technically, the intention can actually be allowed all the way until they spend it. Yeah. So long as they've got it, you can still change your intention there. So al-asl, the principle in this masala is iqtiran. Iqtiran means to be accompanied, intention. إلا أن الدفع يتفرق. However, spending, like we said, 100 million Muslims in the world that give zakat, let's say. When they give, they don't all give in one go. Yeah, they might give a little bit here, a little bit there. So ad-daf', the giving of the zakat by the zakat givers, يتفرق, it spreads. So therefore, that's going to be hard now. Yeah, that's going to be haraj. If you think about it, it's going to be difficult that every time you're going to give them money, you have to think that it's for zakat. So therefore, فَاكْتُفِيَ بِوُجُودِ حَالَةِ الْعَزْلِ. So that's why it suffices, اكتفيا means it suffices, بِوُجُودِهَا, of its existence, of the existence of niyyah, حَالَةَ الْعَزْلِ, at the time of separating the wealth. Meaning when you separated the wealth in a separate jar or a bag, yeah, that moment of intention you had at that time was sufficient. Why is this for? Like, it shouldn't be allowed, really. Technically, it shouldn't be allowed because technically you should have an intention when you're giving it to the person, because that's the time it's an ibadah. Taysiran, for ease. So he's saying basically the reason we've accommodated for this is for ease, because we've seen, like, it does kind of make it easier for people to be able to give their zakat then. Yeah, because not everyone is always like, harder intention. It's not like, if you were to draw the differentiate between salat and zakat, yeah, what happens? Salat, you obviously know you're in salat. It's a state, that's why your intention over there has to be right at the beginning. But when it comes to zakat, it's like you're not giving it. You're not like in a masjid, or you're not in a like a physical realm where you 100% know you're giving zakat. You could be a poor person runs up to you in the street and says, "Please, can I have some money?" And you just, without thinking, take some money out and you give it. Yeah. So this is why he's saying taysiran, to make it easy. Yeah. Like, is there any other example in our fiqh where there is this concept of taysir, of ease? He says, yes, there is. كَتَقْدِيمِ النِّيَّةِ فِي الصَّوْمِ. Like, for example, that we're allowed to, like, in advance, bring our intention earlier for fasting. So what's that? So remember, fasting, you don't have to, no, so let's say Fajr starts at, let's say, 4 o'clock in the morning. Technically, you make your intention just before 4, 3:59, you make your intention, I'm going to fast tomorrow. But for fasting, you don't have to do that. You can actually make your fast, your intention, from Maghrib the night before. So Maghrib, let's say, 10 hours before that, you make your intention there. And even if you went to sleep and you totally didn't think about fasting or anything like that, and you ate, and then the next day, you remembered, oh yeah, I'm fasting. That intention that you made from after Maghrib suffices. Yeah. Why is this for? To make it easy for people. Yeah, because like we said, if everyone had to make their intention at 3:59, it's going to be very hard, because a lot of people don't get up for Sahari Suhoor. They miss it. So that's why he's saying sometimes in fiqh a masla is actually made easy. Yeah. So for taysir purposes. This is why it's very important for every mufti to understand where ease is needed for the people. Right? It's very, very important. And Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, he said that whoever does not know the state of the people, yeah, then he is considered to be the biggest jahil. Like, even if you're a scholar, yeah, man la ya'rif ahwal nas fahuwa jahil. So again, you could know all the books, but you don't know the society. Like we say, you don't have your fingers on the pulse of society. You don't know what's happening at home, people's houses. The domestic issues. Things that are happening in marriages, or between parents and children, or children going to school, or people going to university, or doctors and nurses in hospitals, and all these things. You don't know those. Then the answers you're going to give are never going to be tailored for that situation. They're always going to be very, brush kind of answers, generalized answers, or answers that are not very fair for the people. So again, this is for taysir purposes, yeah, for ease purposes. Like, for example, sometimes the fuqaha, they'll say things like the water which is considered to be a large amount of water is water that's 10 by 10, 10 cubits by 10 cubits. Where did 10 cubits by 10 cubits come from? There's no ayah of the Quran. There's no hadith. They say this is easy because it's easy for people to identify 10 by 10. If you say to people, right, a large amount of water is a water where, you assume it to be large. A lot of people get confused. They would rather people say to them, give us a number. Or the same goes with 48 miles for a journey. So later Hanafis, much later Hanafis, they gave the 48 miles, which is the Shafi position. They gave that. They said it's just easy for people. If you say to people that if you go on a journey of 3 days and 3 nights, then you're a musafir. A lot of people don't know what that distance is. So for ease purposes, just say 48 miles is sufficient. Yeah. So again, this is taysir. And again, taysir over here can be seen because primarily the zakat should be given with an intention. When you're giving it to the poor person in their hand, intention should be this is for zakat. But this is going to obviously be very idealistic, but practically it's not really there. It's not really something which is feasible for everyone, because the way that zakat works and how you deliver the zakat. Now, just a note. Like some people over here have raised the issue, and they've said things like, how do you know you have an intention? How do you know you have intention? Like, do you have to kind of very hard and like focus and think to yourself, I've got an intention of zakat. Have I got it? So simple answer is like if someone came up to you and said to you, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" and you said, "Oh, I'm giving zakat," that would be enough. So in other words, as long as at that moment, like the answer that you give is, "I'm giving zakat," that would be sufficient as intention. Yeah. So same goes for salat as well. Let's say, for example, you're praying, and someone asks you, "What are you praying?" and you said, "I'm praying Zuhr." Yeah, that would be enough to say that your mind was focused that you were going to pray Zuhr. So حالة العزل تيسيرا كتقديم النية في الصوم, just like bringing forward the niyyah in fasting as well. And this is the reason why this I spent a bit of time explaining this concept of taysir is because sometimes what happens in fiqh, people don't realize, like sometimes you get fatwa websites. Fatwa websites is a very bad thing in my opinion. Yeah, fatwas is a very bad thing unless they just give like just like general answers to well-known questions. Yeah, because fatwa websites, what they do is anyone that reads them, they can't see the mufti, like the way he looks at the questioner, the way he looks at the situation and gives an answer accordingly, right? They just see it as being a general answer for everyone, and for taysir that doesn't work. Anyway, so then he says, "Woman tasaddaqa." I actually want to finish all this. So, وَمَنْ تَصَدَّقَ بِجَمِيعِ مَالِهِ لَا يَنْوِي الزَّكَاةِ. Now, here's a question for you guys, which the Hanafis raised. They say, okay, let's say there's a guy, let's say I have got £1,000. How much zakat do I have to give? £25. So what do? I one day gave all of my money. Let's say, for example, one day some guy came to the mosque collecting money for, poor orphans in a particular country, and I felt very sorry for them, and I just, I did a bank transfer and sent all the money I had in my bank. Yeah, £1,000. I gave it to him. Yeah, here you go. And I didn't even think about zakat. Like I didn't even intend zakat at all. Yeah. What's gonna happen now? I've given the money. They've taken it. They've even used the money, and I had no idea of zakat. Now, if my zakat was due, so let's say Monday my zakat was due. I was supposed to give £25 on Monday, but I didn't give it. And on Tuesday, I heard this guy come to the mosque and announced that he was collecting money for the poor, and I gave him all my money. Technically, my zakat isn't done because my zakat requires intention, and I didn't separate the money in my wallet. I gave everything I had. So this should not be allowed, meaning that my zakat has not been done technically. However, Hanafis say this is allowed. سقط فرضها عنه استحسانا. Yeah, the obligation of zakat will have actually dropped. That £25 that I owed on Monday would have now been waived now. Sharia has waived it. But why is this for? So he said the qiyas says, which is Imam Zufr's position as well, and others that say no, it won't because there's no intention. It's like, for example, let's say a guy was to just like, randomly, just to say randomly, some guy just prayed 4 rakats in the middle of the day and carried on and totally forgot about Zuhr, didn't make any intention for Zuhr. He just thought he was in the mosque and he was just going to pray 4 rakats, prayed 4 rakats and went. Will that 4 rakats be counted as Zuhr or not? So it shouldn't be, because he had no intention of Zuhr. He just had intention of praying Nafal. And he totally forgot about praying Zuhr. So the same concept should be here as well. But istihsan basically means, according to Hanafis, istihsan is a concept where you have a theory and then you break that theory because of a stronger dalil. Like, for instance, let's say the theory is that you're not allowed to eat pork. This is the theory. Yeah, Sharia has told us you can't eat pork. But this rule is broken when a person is dying and the only thing to keep them alive is pork. Yeah, they're allowed to eat it. Or for example, let's say, a person is eating food and they're choking on it and there's nothing to make the food go down. Like they're choking on it except a bottle of wine. Nothing else, no other liquid. They're allowed to drink that wine. Yeah, why? Because over here, istihsan. Yeah, so the dalil is stronger than what we call the qiyas. So the original theory, which we call the qiyas here. Now, when I say qiyas, this is not the normal qiyas when we say, maqis and maqis alayhi, when we're comparing the ruling of cocaine to alcohol, and we're saying cocaine is prohibited because the alcohol, it resembles alcohol and is intoxication. That's called qiyas, but that's called comparative qiyas when you're doing comparison between two things. This is qiyas theory, this is what we call theory. So Hanafi sometimes use this word and sometimes they call it al-asl or sometimes they call it something else. Yeah. So istihsan, he says, saqata fard istihsanan. Yeah, via istihsan. Or for example, like the masala of a woman. For example, the qiyas says that a woman should cover up fully. Yeah, everything, her face, her hands, everything should be covered. Yeah. However, the Hanafi say, well, it's going to be difficult for her to move around because she has to show her face to see things, and it's going to be difficult for her to pick things up if her hands are covered all the time. So she has to be able to, and it's going to be difficult for her to be able to walk if her feet are covered all the time. So she has to have, allow her feet to be free. So this is why the Hanafis have allowed. Or for example, like the masala of a woman who, gets a job in someone's house as a cook or a baker, and she has to roll her sleeves up, otherwise her sleeves will get dirty. So is she allowed to roll up her sleeves even though there's other non-mahram men walking about? So Imam Abu Yusuf says, yes, it's allowed because of haraj over here. Yeah, because the qiyas says, no, she shouldn't. But because this situation is a situation that will make her life very difficult, or, her clothes are going to become dirty and then she'll have to wash them, and then, this is spoiling her mal, then she's allowed to do that. Yeah, so very important to understand how istihsan works in the Hanafi school, because only Hanafis use the concept of istihsan as they use it. Other madhabs, they don't really have this concept of istihsan. They have something similar, concepts, but not istihsan. So technically, this guy who's given all of his wealth to charity, his zakat should not have been fulfilled, right? But istihsan, we've allowed it. Why? لأن الواجب جزء منه, because the obligation was a portion of that 1,000. That 1,000 that I gave, the obligation was a portion of that, i.e. £25. فَكَانَ مُتَعَيَّنًا فِيهِ. So it was as though that £25 was like as though it had already been reserved. Yeah. It was like the £25 was already reserved, like you had already put it to a side. Yeah, in that. So because that was already reserved, فَلَا حَاجَةَ إِلَى التَّعْيِينِ. So therefore there is no need to actively specify that 25 is for zakat. Yeah, so when you're given all your wealth, because that 25 was part of the 1,000, and you already knew that you had to give 25 anyway. So when you gave all of it, it was as though you gave that amount which you didn't separate it, but it was as though you separated it. Does everyone understand this? Now, obviously, there's like discussions that people will obviously raise because the qiyas says this is not allowed, just like in salat it's not allowed. Like, in salat, if you had prayed your entire day, let's say someone got up one day and said, all day today I'm going to pray nafal, non-stop. Just non-stop nafal from morning all the way 24 hours. And does not intend any fard salat. Does not intend dhuhr or maghrib or asr, anything at all. But just continues praying nafal all the way. Will their 5 times salat be considered? Will their 5 times salat have been considered if they do this? So majority of Hanafis say no, it won't, because they didn't have intention of those fard salats. Their salat is not done. Yeah, their salat is not done. So that's why this goes into a deeper usul masala, which is the concept of amr being muaqqat. Yeah, amr which is attached to time. Again, if you watch my usul fiqh videos, 28 lessons, I've explained this under the topic of khas amr. Yeah, so they say, the Hanafis say, because multiple actions can occur at one time in one time frame of salat, that's why you need to have intention. Yeah, ta'yinun niyyah is necessary. So you have to specify zuhr in order for it to be considered to be zuhr. However, there is a qawl of zufr which says if you were to pray your nafal all the way throughout the day, non-stop, your 5 salats would be counted as part of that. And it seems as though he's kind of like looking at this masala as well, this idea of the istihsan and the zakat one. However, this idea, this over here, this sort of like a masala of Imam Hidayah really hasn't gone into this. But some other Hanafis have described this masla as being a masla where there is no muzahim. Yeah. So what does that basically mean? So that basically means is that when a person was to give all of their wealth, so if let's say I didn't give all my wealth, how many 25s are there in 1,000? Yeah. So there's 40 25s, 40 25s in 1,000. So that's why there are 40 possible intentions I can make with those 25 pounds. Because there's 40 possible intentions I can make, one of them is zakat. I might give someone 25 pounds as zakat. I might give someone 25 pounds as a gift. I might give 25 pounds as just voluntary, charity. I might give 25 pounds to someone for a sale or whatever. So because there's multiple possibilities of intentions I can make, you have to specify what you're going to do with that specific 25 pound. But over here, because you've given all of it into charity, now there's no possibility of anything sharing anything with that 25. So it automatically is assumed for charity. This is how some people have actually dealt with this masala. So Sahib al-Hidayah deals with it. That's why he says, La hajata ila ta'yin. Yeah, that's why he says, there's no need for specification of what that 25 pound is for. Because you've given all of it, then the multiple intentions have now been eliminated now. There's no room for multiple intentions. Okay. So who decides what qualifies as haraj and what doesn't? Can we do our own? No. So haraj is basically based upon scholars will tell you what haraj is, like the limits of haraj. And then if your situation falls under haraj, then you obviously accept it as haraj. But you can't just decide. Like for example, someone cannot just say, you know what, I find it difficult to get up fajr in the morning. That's haraj for me. Yeah. Or a woman says, I find it difficult to wear a hijab on my head because my hair gets messed up. That will not be counted. Even though personally, like at micro level, they might consider that to be. It has to be considered by those who are experts in the Sharia to decide what falls under haraj, what doesn't fall under haraj. Would a nurse be able to gown up with arms showing the uniform? Or should they? Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. In fact, Sahib al-Ikhtiyar actually gives fatwa on the Abu Yusuf's opinion and says that the women can show their arms up to their elbows in normal situations even. But later Hanafis haven't given fatwa on that. They haven't taken that position. Okay. Right, next. ولو أدى بعض النصاب سقط زكاة زكاة المؤدي عند محمد رحمه الله. ولو أدى بعض الزكاة سقط زكاة المؤدى rather عند محمد. So this is the last masala. If a person was to give, like if a person أدى بعض النصاب, some of their nisab, سقط زكاة we don't have much time in it. Yeah, because I want to explain some things over here. Okay, I think we'll stop there. I might have to explain this. Said 3 lines, but it requires a bit of explanation. It's already past the time. Okay, anyway, chalo, I don't want to rush this, so we'll leave this next time. Alright, so let me just read you some extra things that I have. Yeah, okay, so in Radd al-Muhtar, he mentions a good point, which is basically when a person is giving the zakat, the zakat does not have to come from, like, let's say I've got £1,000 and I have to give £25. The £25 does not have to come from this £1,000. It can actually come from a different source of money. So let's say my brother says to me, shall I give you zakat? I say, fine. He can give zakat on my behalf. So it came from his account. Yeah. So in other words, the zakat does not have to come from that money. Someone else can give zakat on your behalf. Yeah. So this is in Radd al-Muhtar. It says فيه إشارة إلى أنه لا يشترط. In it is an indication that it's not considered a prerequisite to give from the wealth itself zakat. وَلِذَا, and for this reason, لو أمر غيره, if a man was to instruct another person to give on his behalf, جاز, it would be permissible. However, he says there is an ikhtilaf of the scholars if another person was to give from their wealth that was haram, khabith wealth. Yeah. So there's another person, let's say my brother has haram wealth and he gives it from his haram wealth. Will that my zakat have been done? So he says, Ibn al-Jaym says that in Qunya it seems as though he gives preference to permissibility. And then he kind of talks about it and he says others have actually not allowed that. So this is like a side masala that is mentioned based upon this idea. Okay, Badaya, let's see. Okay, I think that's it. Anything else? Yeah, okay, so if you've got any other questions, put in the comments. Okay, so just to kind of summarize, so we talked about today about this idea of a person buys something and he intends it for sale, it automatically is counted as a commodity of sale, therefore it's zakatable because intention is there and amal is there, and tijara is an amal. As opposed to a person who inherits something, because there's no amal there. Because you can't inherit voluntarily. You have to accept it. Like it's yours. So that's why even if you made an intention, inherited something from a grandfather, I made intention I'm going to sell it, it doesn't count as zakat. But what about those 5 things? A person who receives a gift, or a person who receives a wasiyah, or a woman who receives mahar as a nikah, or a woman who gives her mahar back for khula, or a person who gives an out of court settlement due to murder. So Abu Yusuf says in all of these, if he makes an intention of selling these things off, they count as zakat mal. And Imam Muhammad says no. And then there's what's the reason? Because Imam Abu Yusuf says all of this is amal. Amal is accepting. There's an acceptance there. That's an amal. Imam Muhammad said that's not enough. There has to be amal of tijara take place. Then some of the later Hanafis have actually said no, the ikhtilaf is actually the other way around. Yeah, where Imam Muhammad says all of these things are zakatable, and Imam Abu Yusuf says no. And Imam Abu Hanifa seems to be on the position of that there's no zakat. Okay, what about when you're giving zakat? Do you have to make intention when you're giving? We say yes, you have to make intention. Or you can separate the wealth. Whilst you are separating the wealth and putting it in a separate container or a place, you made the intention that this mal is going to go for zakat. Now look, if you have separated money in a jar all year round, you're saying this mal is going to go for zakat. You don't have to give that in zakat. You can actually use it up. Yeah. As long as you give zakat from somewhere else, that mal does not automatically now become specified for zakat. This is important to remember, okay, very important, because some people think, they'll think, you know what, these notes that I've got, I actually made an intention that I was going to give this to, I promised that I was going to give this to a charity. You don't have to, yeah? That's up to you if you want to, but it's not compulsory upon you to give. Yeah. And then what if a person, what's the reason for this? We said because when you're giving your wealth and you're separating it, and the idea is, you want to make it easy upon people. So when they're giving the zakat, right, sometimes they might not have the intention of giving zakat. So that's why it's like the idea of making a niyyah from Maghrib time, yeah, when you're fasting. Yeah, so you're allowed to you don't have to make it right before Fajr starts. Okay, what if a person was to gift all of their wealth away after zakat was necessary on them? They're £1,000, £25 they have to give on Monday, but they decided that they're going to give all their wealth to poor people and they had no intention of zakat. Then what happens? So in this case, we say the obligation has dropped. Now here he doesn't mention, what if a person was to give part of it, was only to give half of it. So I've got £1,000 and I gave 500 in charity. Yeah, I had no intention of zakat. Do I still have to give £25, or does that £25 now cut into £12.5? Yeah, so we're going to talk about that next time, inshallah. Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Okay, tomorrow